Good morning to you all. On behalf of OLADE and networking experts knowledge platform, we appreciate your participation in this webinar related to the thematic network energy integration, where we will discuss about the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office strategic imperatives. The presentation will be conducted by Dr. Earl Green. Earl Green owns a PhD degree in Sustainable Development, Built Environment and Energy Management Systems. He worked for several years in the petroleum industry in the Caribbean region and developed a career as a part-time lecturer at the University of Technology in Jamaica as well. He has several publications on topics related to sustainable development, energy efficiency, and the role of renewable energy in developing economies. Dr. Green is a Latin American Energy Organization sub-regional energy consultant for the Caribbean. It's important to remind all participants that you can ask the questions to Dr. Green through the chat with a message to all the attendees. The questions will be answered once the presentation is over. We kindly ask to keep your microphones off so that there is no interference during the webinar. Furthermore, we remind you that webinar is being recorded and will be available on the website of the network in the coming days. We welcome Dr. Green and go ahead with your presentation.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen, Marcelo?
No, Dr. Green. No, I don't see your screen.
Okay, just a moment. Are you seeing it now?
Yes, Dr. Green.
Good. Okay, let me just. All right. Good morning again, everyone. I'd just like to welcome you to this presentation titled Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, the Strategic Imperatives, and that is what we will be discussing this morning. Firstly, though, before we get started, I'd like to share with you the vision and the mission of OLADE. OLADE is a political and technical support organization through which its member states undertake common efforts to achieve regional and sub-regional energy integration. As it relates to the mission is to contribute to the integration, sustainable development, and energy security in the region, advising and promoting cooperation and coordination among its member states. Having said that, I'd like for us to have a brief overview as to the topics that will be covered in this presentation this morning. First, we'll have a look at the situational analysis. In brief, the role of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office. We'll have a brief look at the mandate and the strategic imperatives of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office. We'll look at some of our accomplishments and the summary milestones over the last year. We'll look at some of the current developments, and we will conclude with a look at the short to medium-term action plan to include, in the main, training and capacity building and the sustainable energy options for the Caribbean. So, situational analysis. It is no secret that the Caribbean has an abundance of energy, but this chart that I will share with you will look at, and I hope you can see the cursor as I move along. We can start by looking at the principal renewable energy options within the Caribbean. And then we can look at the non-renewable options. And I will choose to start from the right, looking at Grenada and Barbados. Basically, most of the energy generated in these two countries is from fossil fuel. There is hardly any non-renewable type of energy option to speak about in these two countries. In Guyana, we have a very small amount of a small amount of the energy in Guyana, which is generated from the mainstream fossil fuel, as we call it, because the majority of the energy in Guyana is generated from non-renewable sources. When we look at Cuba and Jamaica, we have a very small amount of energy in these two countries that's generated from non-renewable sources. The majority is from hydrocarbon sources. The Dominican Republic has a similar story, and so is Haiti. When we look at Belize, for example, Belize has a much better mix in that vast amount of their energy comes from different forms of renewable sources, as well as fossil fuel based energy. So that gives us a brief overview as to where we are in terms of the energy spread in the Caribbean. There are, as we indicated, options for renewable energy options, and we will get to that closer to the end of this presentation. But looking at the overall energy mix within the Caribbean region, there are some reasons as to why we have not been able to utilize other energy forms in our energy mix to be more energy independent and to optimize the different energy options that we have at our disposal. The main reasons as to why we have not been able to utilize these are summarized as follows. And the slide you're looking on speaks to barriers inhibiting growth in the energy sector in the Caribbean. And one of the main ones appear to be our technical capabilities, the ability to identify, develop, implement, and sustain a cost-effective energy program with participation from key and influential stakeholders. There is the issue of creditworthiness based on how governments and financial sectors are structured within the Caribbean. Enough attention over the years have not been paid to the issue of credit. And living in a global market space today, it is very important that we understand that for sizable projects, for us to be able to procure funds at reasonable interest rates, we have to have a very good system of credit. We don't have that. So here it is that we're saying the ability to raise or to arrange project-based financing from even the local commercial banks in a structured and efficient manner is a problem within the Caribbean region, and this is one of the barriers, in my view, as to why it is that we have not been able to grow beyond where we are in this regard. Now, there is the regulatory aspect. We do not necessarily have an enabling legal framework that would recognize clearly the status and the specificities of an energy performance contract supported by a justice system that can efficiently enforce contractual agreements. That on its own is a serious problem, in that whilst there is an international financing mechanism through which we can develop and implement projects, meaning we can get financing, there isn't any true mechanism within Caribbean states to appreciate the potency of such a system. And even so, there is hardly any support in terms of a commercial court through which to settle disputes. That in itself poses a problem as well. Then there is the issue of standards and specifications, the presence of a neutral third-party institution that certifies renewable energy and energy efficiency products and other services as an important commercial imperative is somewhat missing. Then we look at the strategic focus and the definition and presentation of a market. In the Caribbean, what we find is that oftentimes this type of development, energy efficiency, renewable energy development, takes place within the private sector. And what we'll find is that governments on their own will try to implement energy efficiency initiatives within the government sector. That is not necessarily the best practice. The best practice on the global front is for the governments to offer up the public sector to the private sector for them to develop projects of scale for efficiency, and that is not normally done within the Caribbean. Then there are structural and political barriers, and by this I mean the unnecessary and inappropriate government interventions, incoherent and unpredictable policies, policy reversals, issues related to tariff that poses a problem within the Caribbean for the development of this type of project. So we have the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, and what it is that OLADE had in mind. Well, firstly, I'd like for us to look at our legal standing, because this office was set up a few years ago for a time T, and that time T just expired in September of this year, meaning just last month, today being the 1st of October. And simply to say that the OLADE sub-regional office has been extended for another 3 years, and that is after an intervention on the part of the Secretary General to the Ministry of Science, Technology, Energy and Mining in Jamaica about some 4 months ago, making the request and soliciting the support from the other member states to support the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office being in Jamaica for another 3 years. The support was forthcoming, and the government of Jamaica decided that they would allow for the continuance of the office. And so starting September 2015, the agreement for the existence of the office, as it were, was extended for another 3 years. So we'll now look at the mandate. Fundamentally, the mandate is to provide technical and political support for member countries in the development and integration of the energy market. Secondly, to identify areas of common interest for cooperation in technical development and transfer. To support initiatives for capacity building through energy and human resource development. To develop modern energy information systems and energy data hub, to develop and deploy regional energy resources to foster social and economic development in a sustainable manner, and to provide national and regional institutional linkages and support in order to encourage efficient and rational use of energy. Now, having outlined in brief what the mandate of the sub-regional office is, we now look at our strategic imperatives. Firstly, to support institutional strengthening of the energy authorities of the member states, and this comes in different ways. Secondly, to consolidate a regional platform of knowledge management in the energy sector, and to disseminate good practice in the management of the petroleum and electricity sectors. In addition, to contribute to sustainable energy development and social inclusion within the Caribbean. And lastly, and certainly not the least amongst them, to promote integration and regional energy security. We'll now quickly look at some of our summary milestones and accomplishments over the last period. Right. Firstly, we've had a CSR forum. We launched the Caribbean Energy Statistical Capacity Building Initiative earlier this year, which is some 500,000 US dollars support for the development of initiatives in capacity building across the Caribbean, most of which is expected to be done in the upcoming year. We have a number of training initiatives across the Caribbean. We have had a number of energy balances, and we'll speak to that later as well. We have had a few consultancies. The Caribbean Sub-Regional Office has made a number of presentations across the region and even as far as Europe, promoting what it is that we do. And we've had numerous engagements in support of the profiling of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office. Now, one of the main consultants that we focused on is that of generation planning for Jamaica. And this scope was to develop a profile in generation planning and to identify possible financial schemes for the energy sector in Jamaica. Unfortunately, for us, we had some difficulties obtaining the requisite information from both the power company and the regulator, the extent to which this report is still incomplete. We're yet to bring closure to it because of the absence of the requisite information. We had a consultancy that ultimately led to a workshop, and that was the National Appropriate Mitigation Action, NAMA. And the scope of the NAMA was to engage in report on NAMA activities in Jamaica. We completed a draft report following a workshop which was in July of this year, and this workshop was very well attended by key stakeholders. The final report is being completed to be submitted to the Ministry of Science, Technology, Energy and Mining here in Jamaica, and also to the Ministry of Land, Water, Environment and Climate Change. We have had an invitation from the German Chamber of Commerce in December of last year to attend a renewable energy conference in Berlin to share with German developers that which is happening in the sphere of renewable energy in the Caribbean, the extent to which the Germans have now decided that in November of this year they want to host a conference, a seminar, if you may, an exhibition of German-made renewable energy technologies in the Caribbean. So they are seriously negotiating to have that exhibition in November, and I've actually nominated the date, November 17th. So the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office was very instrumental in bringing to their attention the different opportunities that exist. And of importance is not just that the Germans are seeking to ply their ware in the Caribbean. They are seeking partnerships. So they are looking for Caribbean investors to partner with. They have the technology, we have the market, and so they have indicated an interest in coming to the Caribbean to try and see if they can partner with us. Of importance as well is OLADE sharing its knowledge, its expertise in the development of various areas across the Caribbean, and one such was in the field of metrology and energy. There's a regional two-day workshop on metrology and technology challenges within the region, and OLADE was invited to present a paper to the Caribbean Metrology Institute and to the Jamaica Bureau of Standards. And that presentation was made and well received. The Jamaica Solar Energy Association as well had their annual general meeting and invited the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office to speak on matters related to the development of activities, the profiling of OLADE, and the extent to which OLADE can contribute to the continuous development of the sector within the region. And so OLADE was quite instrumental in sharing that sort of information with the group. We hosted the executive secretary here at the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office earlier this year, and the executive secretary was accompanied by a delegation, and so we were very happy to have been able to receive the executive secretary. In addition to that, the executive secretary and the delegation had a meeting to form an alliance with the University of Technology, Jamaica. And the desire was to firstly sign an MOU and then to have a joint diploma program which will offer a professional certificate course in social inclusion and energy access. And that program is well on its way in terms of its preparation. And that's one of the things that we will be offering to the Caribbean, because we have the first tranche of scholars will be trained starting on the 6th of October, and this includes participants from 9 Caribbean countries that will be engaged in this 6 weeks program. And it was instrumental and important that our executive secretary was here to cement that deal with the University of Technology, Jamaica. OLADE was also invited last month to share or to be an observer at the Petro-Carib Summit in Montego Bay, and so a delegation from OLADE attended the summit. And in addition to that, we were also invited to participate in the celebration of the 200th anniversary of the letter from Jamaica, which was written 200 years ago by the renowned liberator Simon Bolivar. A museum was also opened in his honor in downtown Kingston. So OLADE was also participated in those exercises. Having said that, let us look at our current developments. Whilst we are pursuing a number of initiatives, and some of which we are trying to pursue with CARICOM, there are some other initiatives that are being developed by OLADE on its own, and the key ones are the energy balances. And I speak firstly to St. Kitts and Nevis, and first because that one is very close to completion, though tedious in terms of getting information. We have, but we weathered the storm, and we are at that stage now where we have sufficient information. A draft report was completed and was also reviewed. We're at the stage of having the launch of that report to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. So that is being worked on for early next month, that is. In addition to that, we are making some inroads into Antigua and Barbuda as it relates to the development of our energy balance there. We have gathered some data. We are still in the data gathering phase, and so that is something from which government and people of Antigua and Barbuda will be able to benefit from in a very short moment. We are, however, having some difficulties in the pursuit of the acquisition of data in the Bahamas, primarily because of a lack of on-the-ground support. We are nonetheless working assiduously on this particular energy balance, and we do hope to be gaining some traction soon. So there are other regional projects that we are pursuing. And in due course, we'll be sharing much more. As I earlier alluded to, some are being developed with CARICOM, others are being developed through support from the World Bank, but we will speak to those later on. Now let's have a quick look at our short to medium term action plan. And much of what it is that we're offering through the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office at this moment is training and capacity building. However, what we have done is to invite the respective member states and those that are aspiring to be members of OLADE to advise us of the different areas of interest at this point in time, and to also advise us as to the areas where they think that they could leverage our support through training and capacity building, and in whatever other way it is that we can. We are at this point having received information from some of our key countries, some proposals to develop initiatives for our upcoming action plan, which is to say for 2016 moving forward. And we'll start with Belize, as indicated an interest in that they need support for energy planning, support for end user data collection, a requirement for a tool to collect and store data, and they have also required support in training to aid the energy planning process. And fortunately, we have a tool, LEAP, that will be used to assist in doing this. But these are some of the plans that we have scheduled to work with our local contacts in Belize to develop these initiatives for the coming year. In Guyana's requested support for end-user data collection and analysis, support for energy planning as well, and they have advised that an energy management system is required. Now, we are of the view that we will find some means of supporting Guyana to achieving these objectives in the coming year. Jamaica, on the other hand, has a much longer list of made some requests. Whilst they have a much larger infrastructure in place, they're asking for assistance on information systems which allow for the entry of not just quantitative data but also qualitative data. There's a growing renewable energy sector in Jamaica. There's an absence, however, of data, and as such, the Jamaican government is asking for support to harness the data from within the renewable energy sector. Data analysis within the sector is also of challenge, and the government, in its wisdom, is of the view that they would like support for data, energy data analysis to support their decision-making processes. They've also asked for technical support and training, data management, and energy planning. Systems support, training in the use of forecasting and other tools. We have also given, and some of which they asked for, we were well positioned to do some of that for this year. For example, the climate change workshop. We have offered other courses in CAPHEAD, and we have had a gender and energy seminar already in Jamaica late last year. So some of these things that they're asking for, we have been able to do because they were already aligned with our action plan for this year. But the others, we will try to facilitate in the upcoming year. Grenada is also asking for support for data analysis, a mechanism to address challenges that arise with imported data, and assessment of data gap and challenges. And so they're asking us for a solution to this, as well as they've identified the need of an energy management system. The extent to which OLADE, through the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, will be able to assist, that we will do. And Haiti, not being a member as yet, we are at this stage discussing the conduct of a national workshop with them. Now, having said this, there are some things that we recognize that we must do to go forward. And some of these initiatives that we aim to undertake within a short period is and I alluded to those energy balances that are being undertaken right now. There are some more to come, and so that's a part of the support that we'll be giving to our member countries going forward. The strengthening and improvement of the sub-regional energy integration as a whole is something on the agenda for this year, going into next year. Recognizing the importance of South-South cooperation, and so we need to start to better integrate ourselves with the different faculties that shepherd these initiatives. Energy scenarios in Latin America and the Caribbean is something that we need to also look at as to how we treat it as the next step. The regional knowledge platform, renewable energy and energy efficiency for Latin America and the Caribbean, the extent to which we play a role, to which we have more access to information, and the extent to which we are more participatory. And of course, there's other technical support that we look forward to participating in. Now, quickly looking at the priorities and outlook of the energy sector, we recognize that for the Caribbean sub-regional office, the impact that energy has overall on our economy is of fundamental importance, and so the reduction in overall oil imports is of importance to all countries that are member states and beyond. The adoption and implementation of a CARICOM energy policy is something that we're assisting CARICOM to promote, because as energy specialists within the OLADE, the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, we recognize the importance of standardizing energy policies across the region, but more importantly, for each country to recognize the benefits of so doing. The incorporation of alternate energy forms in the overall energy use profile of countries that may have access to some forms of renewable energy but are not currently utilizing it would like to assist, even by way of training and promotion, to assist them in so doing. The policy shift to allow for greater proliferation and use of proven energy efficiency technologies within the sector. Whilst we recognize the usefulness of energy efficiency technologies, not all countries have the requisite policies in place to facilitate the development and use of renewable energy options. And this goes right back to the use of the CARICOM energy policy, which speaks in very general terms, and there's some amount of specificity as well as to the importance of the adoption of energy efficiency technologies, but supported by policies, that is. So we want to strengthen and improve sub-regional energy integration, as we said. We want to facilitate the creation of linkages, association between local entities and larger international corporations to the extent that we can. We want to promote the creation and development of knowledge platforms specific to alternate energy forms, and of course we want to continue with the capacity building and other technical support. Let's look at the energy options. In the Caribbean, we have, in terms of how we move forward, we have to look beyond the use of high-priced fossil fuels, notwithstanding the fact that some countries within the region would have agreements through the Petro-Caribbean agreement with Venezuela. We are of the view that from an energy efficiency perspective, we have to diversify, and diversification will require the use of other energy options such as the smart grid, right? We have to get to the point where we start investing in that. For those countries that have hydro power availability or hydro potential, we need to try to find means to encourage and to support these countries to utilize hydro as a renewable energy option. For those countries that have the economies of scale to deal with biomass, that certainly they should, we as OLADE would want to help to support, even by way of training, to the extent that we can, these member states in the areas of biomass. And that's one of the initiatives that we'll be pursuing with Jamaica as well. Energy efficiency is undoubtedly one of the most renowned source of energy. It's like a source of energy itself. And that is one of the main reasons why we have invested so much as OLADE and as the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office in developing and promoting capacity building programs in energy efficiency. There are some areas in the Caribbean region that seem to have geothermal potential. And again, as part of the Energy Diversification Initiative, we would like to help in assisting some of these countries with these abilities to develop their own competencies and understanding of the different energy options within their realm so that they could capitalize on that. And I've left the last two being solar and wind, because most persons are aware of the potency of both solar and wind. And we have seen where a country like Jamaica, for example, would have developed a significant amount of wind power capacity to feed into the grid. And we have a very large amount of solar technology being utilized right across the Caribbean. Unfortunately, we do not have sufficient data to suggest exactly how much it is. And that's a part of the work that OLADE would like going forward to further develop to support the different countries within the region to be able to advise truly on the capacity, because these two areas have perhaps, along with energy efficiency, have the highest potential for growth. And whilst there is growth, they will ultimately aid in the displacement of the use of fossil fuel, and in the longer term will only improve the economic metrics of the respective countries from a balance of payment perspective. And it is in that context that as the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, we would want to be further develop programs in support of our member states to improve their national energy profiles. And having said that, I would like to, much of what I said just now was also contained on this slide. So I would just like to end the presentation and to field questions on whomever it is that have questions. The slides are there, will be shared with you so persons can look at will at what it is that they have a particular interest in the presentation. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I have some questions, but I think that the first one was already answered, but I will publish anyway. What is the most suitable renewable energy source that could be exploited in the Caribbean region?
I didn't hear. Could you repeat the question?
What is the most suitable renewable energy source that could be exploited in the Caribbean region in the short time or in the medium time?
Okay. I'm going to answer the question in two parts. There are many persons that will respond to your question by saying that energy efficiency and energy conservation are renewable sources within themselves within a particular context. And why is that so? Because by the implementation of technologies to conserve on energy, number one, and number two, to promote energy efficiency options, you are saving energy, so it is like a source of energy itself. So that's number one. But the broader answer to your question has to be solar and wind energy. As you are aware, the Caribbean has sunshine right throughout the year. We know that there is technology now, even with cheaper oil prices. We're still finding in the industry that solar technology is still at that point where it is cost effective. Wind technology is a little bit more expensive at this time, but it still presents a very good option, very good renewable energy option.
Thank you, Dr. Green. What could be the path in order to establish a regulation system that could promote the diversification of the energy mix?
Well, the good thing in the Caribbean is that we already have a CARICOM energy policy that speaks to the issue of diversification. You have some countries that have already started the implementation of aspects of the energy policy. Jamaica is one of those countries that is very far advanced as it relates to the implementation of an energy policy. So there's a Jamaica energy policy. Jamaica, Trinidad, Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. Some of the other countries have implemented other aspects of the energy policy, but I dare say that there are many CARICOM states that have not fully embraced the use of the CARICOM energy policy, and they may very well have their own policies, but these policies need strengthening. I think the best thing to do is to develop capacity building and training programs at the highest levels in these countries for them to better understand and appreciate the power of having a very good energy policy and the actual implementation, because for some of these countries, they may very well be trained, but they don't know how to do the actual implementation, which in many respects must be supported by regulations, which may have to come by way of an act of parliament. So it's at the political level and it's at the legislative level. But before you get to that level, they must understand that it needs to be done, and this requires training and capacity building.
Thank you, Dr. Green. One more question. You said that even with low oil prices, the solar energy is a good option. Can we say that in this moment there will be a good energy market for the solar, meaning that there is no need to have a subsidized solar energy?
Okay. I don't know what you mean by subsidized solar energy, but
the prices.
Go ahead.
The prices. If we have, if the government should subsidize the solar energy producers in order to establish a market in Jamaica, for example, or if not, a need of subsidize in order to them to establish a market.
Okay, I just like to say that different governments use different mechanisms for taxation. In the more developed countries, we don't have the sort of tariff structure that we have in developing countries. In the Caribbean, for example, many countries may assign a tariff, a tax, to every good, to every component, and that is a part of the problem. So if these taxes were removed, I don't know that I would necessarily call it a removal of subsidy. Perhaps they ought not to have been there in the first place. So I'm saying even at current prices, because I am aware of projects that are being done in at least 4 Caribbean countries right now, meaning solar energy projects, that are turning out to be still cost effective. They are more cost effective than even with the prices of oil where they are today. So the answer to that is I don't know that subsidy will cause any harm. I don't know that it is a subsidy that they will be removing. because in our minds, within the sector, we see it as taxation, unnecessary taxation, and not a subsidy.
Thank you, Dr. Green. We have a question from Meluscience. What about the integration of official, academic, and private sectors?
I didn't get that. Could you repeat the question?
What about the integration of official, academic, and private sectors? I don't understand, but I suppose that if in order to change the energy mix of the Caribbean region, what about the integration of official, academic, and private sectors? There is any integration or not?
Did you say academic?
Yeah, academic, private, and official, government.
Okay. I think integration at all levels is very, very important. We have seen evidence where non-integration has caused very limited interest in the development of certain projects. I can give you an example. The government of Jamaica sought to develop a huge energy efficiency initiative right across the country. But the government sought to develop the project on its own using private sector contractors to implement the work. The understanding in the sector is that the government is not designed to do that type of project implementation, and what the government should have done is to engage the private sector, to partner with the private sector to do the implementation, and the project would have been more successful. We have seen a similar case in Barbados. I'm familiar with a case in Grenada as well. I'm familiar with a number of cases in the Bahamas where governments seek to do project implementation rather than opening up the public sector to the private sector and partnering with them, because they have greater capacity to implement these projects. They have a broader knowledge base. The expertise reside more so in the private sector, and this type of integration will only assist with greater partnerships and greater results. As it relates to academia, I think, is at a point where they are consistently doing research and making publications. They perhaps need to do more of that. The question arises as to whether or not the respective governments in the region takes these reports and these inputs from academia seriously, and whether or not academia ought not to be more proactive in doing the necessary research in aiding government to better understand the questions that surround the issues within the sector, so that they can be in a better position at the decision-making level to make whatever decision that they need to make. So I see the integration as a win-win situation for all parties, and much more of this needs to be encouraged and practiced.
Thank you, Dr. Green. We have another question. What do you think about a decision-making support coming from a multilateral institution?
Did you say a decision-making what?
What do you think about a decision-making support coming from a multilateral institution? I think that the question wants to know your opinion about if the government in the Caribbean are willing to take the support in decisions about the energy from a multilateral institution.
I think one needs to be careful how that is done. I think it is being done. I think governments listen to the multilaterals, but at the end of the day, every government wants to demonstrate some amount of independence, and so it may not be known in some quarters that they are taking advice from external parties. Every government wants to believe, or wants its people to believe, wants the region to believe that it is independent in taking the actions that they do take. But I happen to know, because I have worked for multinationals that do advise government, but it has to be done discreetly, right? Most governments would not want it to be known that they're taking advice from multinationals. So it's a political issue that will have to be handled carefully.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Green. What kind of methodology procedure can we apply in energy planning for the Caribbean region?
The question is, what kind of methodology can we apply for energy planning in the Caribbean?
Yeah.
Okay. I alluded to it in the presentation. There are some countries that are far advanced in their understanding and practice of truly what is required for efficient and effective energy planning. Some countries are fully aware of what needs to be done, but many cannot develop and implement some of what is contained in their own energy plans because of the issue of resources. There's a generating resource constraint, and so this inhibits development for some in some areas. So this is something that one would have to look at. How do we get the requisite resources to improve? That is for those countries that already have an energy plan and are implementing aspects of the energy plan. Then there are those countries that do not have a well-developed energy plan within the Caribbean. As I said earlier, an outreach program of capacity building demonstrating the effectiveness and the worth of having a proper energy plan and its ultimate implementation. And in my mind, that could be a project that could be undertaken by even say an OLADE, whereby on recognizing the need for the development and implementation of a robust energy policy to offer to the member states training and capacity building. I think the best training, though, is going to take place on the ground in the country, rather than having a workshop and inviting them out where they send one or two persons to actually go into the respective ministries with the responsibility for the development and implementation of an energy policy, and to invite other major stakeholders in the respective countries, and you carry out a workshop, a training, something practical to demonstrate to them how it is done, and importantly, to guide in terms of the implementation of the policy. I can give you just an idea. I visited a country within the Caribbean. I wish not to state which country, only recently. And I met with some senior government officials, and I sought to speak to them about standards within the energy sector and so forth. And quite a few persons, and remember I said some of these are senior persons, they did not understand how to transition from an understanding of a standard into practice. Meaning, how do I get a standard to work? How do I get the regulatory support for this standard? Having gotten the regulatory support, how do I now implement the standard? These understandings they did not have. And as I said, these are senior persons within the government for this particular country. So this wasn't the first time I was seeing this. So what is really needed in many of these countries is the training. It's the how. How do you do it? It's not just a theoretical exercise, but you have to expand it to show them how to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Green. In line with you have said, we have an Edgar Cruz question. The big losers of the undergoing energy transformation are the traditional energy utilities. How do you think they could be engaged in this process?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
The big losers of the undergoing energy transformation are the traditional energy utilities. How do you think they could be engaged in this process?
Okay, just like everything in life, processes are evolutionary to include business practices. So if their business is to trade fossil fuel that we now know has some environmental degrading effects after its use. One of one of the ways of getting around this is to invite these persons as major stakeholders to the region, firstly, to improve on their delivery from an environmental perspective. So basically, that they start developing cleaner processes for the processing of their products and to ensure that the end product is more environmentally friendly. So you engage them at that level. Secondly, if it is that you're talking about diversification, what are you going to diversify to? They may have an interest in partnering as a major stakeholder in developing your new preferred option. So let's say you have a petroleum company that is providing heavy fuel oil for power generation, and you have found that there is some amount of wind capacity in this country. That very entity, and recognizing that if a wind generating plant was to be brought online, that they possibly could lose some amount of revenue in that they would be selling less fuel. They may very well have an interest in participating. They may very want to build. They may even want to build that wind plant. It's about stakeholder engagement. It's about having an energy plan that includes diversification. It's about having a plan and a practice that includes all the major stakeholders, because they may very well be interested in the solutions that are brought onto the table. Exclude no one.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I think that if there is no more questions, we can end this webinar session. So we appreciate your participation, and we thank Dr. Green for the excellent presentation. Thank you to all.
You're most welcome. Bye.
Bye. Thank you to all.
Bye.